BoLS fans, AdamHarry back in with another quick Horus Heresy, the Burning of Prospero video. I got Big Red here. Say hi.
Hi, guys.
We're going to be talking about... Boom! We're going to be talking about the Legions of War book, Legions at War book, and of course we're going to go a little bit more in depth with some of the rules.
Because you guys want to know, what is this game and how does it work?
Is it actually a game? It is actually a game.
It is actually a game.
It's pretty cool, actually.
It is pretty cool.
So we're going to start with the Legions at War book. And we talked about this one in the general unboxing video that we've already done. But we just wanted to take it through real quick.
Yeah. This is there are no rules at all in this book.
No, this part of the video has no rules in it.
Correct. This is entirely background information. What is it all about?
Yes.
Who are the Thousand Sons? What are the Space Wolves?
Like if you have no idea about this board game at all, like we mentioned, if you got this for a Christmas present, your kid, this is the book you're going to want to read to catch up what's going on.
It's also fantastic for all you hobbyists, because this has all the paint schemes and this has all the models that are in the box set. This has like all of the glam photography and all of the Forge World drawings and everything. So this is what all the stuff is.
Another quick too, the layout of the book actually mirrors exactly like the other Horus Heresy books. So if you got one of the big red books or big black books that have the Horus Heresy stuff, it's the same kind of font, the same colors in the pages, that yellow color with the red. So if you're familiar with that at all, you're going to recognize a lot of this. This actually is the whole story of Horus, and then it basically takes you through the Horus Heresy up until the turning of the Traitor Legions, and then also why the Space Wolves are being sent after the Thousand Sons. And so it's got that part of the backstory in there. If you've read A Thousand Sons or the Prospero Burns, you're familiar with all that. If you haven't, it's got a really quick breakdown for you, which is pretty cool. It's got a summary of the Space Wolf Legion, which is great. It's got a summary of one of the members of the tactical squad here. So this one is Hrothbrad Steelmane, a Space Wolf Legion 12th Company Bloodied Claw. And then we have Giger Fellhand and his backstory, which is actually pretty interesting. He apparently was a bit of a hothead, kind of like a Blood Claw, trying to get his teeth bloodied in battle, and it fits. So the next up is we have a Custodian Guard, and of course the Sisters of Silence. Their backstory, who they are, what they represent, why their presence at the battle is really significant. The fact that the Custodian Guard are basically the right hand of the Emperor was a sign to Magnus that you screwed up.
Yeah.
And you made the Emperor very angry.
And Daddy is very upset.
Yeah. So all that talks about the Thousand Sons Legion, talks about Armin, which I'm going to read to you. And again, two quick breakdowns of examples of the Thousand Sons Tactical Legionary, Thousand Sons Terminator, and their little backstory for one of the guys. So it's actually a pretty cool little book, and then of course follows up with all that. So this is actually a really cool little book to flip through. It's short booklet, but very valuable if you have no idea what's going on.
Also, fantastic illustrations for all the painters out there.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is, I think, the real value.
Now, the part that you've all been waiting for.
Here we go. The rules.
Yes.
So, we got as we went over this a little briefly in the initial unboxing, but we're gonna go through it a little in depth here. So here we go. So. First, we're going to start with our table of contents. So what we have here, 32 pages. As we said, the actual core rules themselves are approximately 10 pages.
Correct.
So this is a game like Betrayal at Kolth. You're going to be up and running and playing this game really quickly. Yep. And it is a fun game.
Yes, it's quick. If you liked Overkill, if you like that kind of, if you like the Space Marines attacking and stuff like that, because it's Marine on Marine, it reminds me a lot of how the Death Watch fought. If you kind of had Death Watch fighting Death Watch in that game, it's very similar to that game. Yeah, so people aren't dying quite as much, but it's still really violent and there's lots of combat happening.
Yeah, it's going to move. It's going to be very fast moving and tons of cool different dice. We'll get to that, but it definitely doesn't have that asymmetrical kind of feel that Overwatch.
Right, Overkill.
Overkill did, where one side is like, I'm killing everybody, and the other side is said, we don't care because we have infinite numbers. It's not that kind of game. It's not that kind of game. Both sides, like Kolth, both sides are definitely well matched.
It's kind of like they took the idea of a well matched balance game of like Kolth and the more of the mechanics from Overkill and kind of merged those two. Yeah. So it's a good middle ground. It's definitely a different game then Betrayal at Call. Definitely a different game than Overwatch, but if you've played those two games, you're going to recognize those similarities.
Okay. So this is your basic components and setup and kind of what this game is and what it's going to do. So we're going to go over a lot of this for you. So the first thing we have is you have all the board tiles. Now, obviously, this is the huge, giant, fancy, every possible thing that comes in the box set is in this picture. Most missions use substantially smaller boards than this.
It can vary, but the first thing you do is pick the scenario so that you can place the board tiles.
Correct.
So that's the important part. And then obviously you're going to pick your sides. So
yes.
One player's got to be the Space Wolves, one player's got to be the Thousand Suns. I guess technically, if you wanted to use generic Marine chapters, you could. You just have to decide who's going to play which.
Sure, absolutely.
Because one of you is going to have psychic powers and the other one's probably not.
That's true.
Yeah.
Get all your dice together.
Oh, each scenario you will have specific psychic power cards, which is important.
We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yep.
And speaking of step 4, gather dice. Look at that. Look at that. So you got gray dice, you get red dice, this is the craziest dice that I've seen in the Games Workshop game in a long time. D6s, D8s, D10s, there's some D12s in there.
Yep.
Pretty cool. We'll talk more about those later.
Yep. Yeah, gather dice, psychic power cards, prepare and shuffle decks. That's your psychic decks, which we're going to leave that for another time. But then muster your forces, and that's really just
prepare for war. We're going to go over really quickly the things in the pictures here. Obviously, you have your board, you have all the miniatures. These are the two. Ooh, it's like we're photocopying a mirror. It's like these are the two books that we're looking at right now.
Whoa! It's like that scene in Spaceballs.
Yeah. It's crazy. And then we have our 2 different decks of psychic decks that the Thousand Suns player is going to use, and then there's the willpower deck that the Imperial player is going to use. You get wound counters, you get all kinds of stuff.
Get your dice.
Some missions call for, there's lots of these little, there's these little round ovals. These are effects that different psychic powers use.
Yep. Some can be offensive, some can be defensive.
And some are just funky. And then, of course, we have most of the small things are obstructions, which are just zones that you cannot go into.
They block line of sight and do other things.
Yeah, they help to break up the board, and those are specified by the each mission. Let's take a look at the general principles. These 2 pages are going to give you all of the big picture things, kind of show you turn sequence, what this game is really about. Adam, let's go ahead and go with the general principles.
Yeah, again, this does use multiple dice. We talked about that already, D6, D8, D20, and D12s, and those, we'll get to how you use those later. We'll get to that. Some abilities do allow you to reroll. Again, same reroll stuff. You can never reroll a reroll.
Clearly.
Yeah. Slain models, if the model dies, is slain, removed from the board.
Right, he's out.
He's out. Zones, again, this is going to go, we'll cover this more in the movement phase, but if you remember from the unboxing video, each zone is kind of embossed, and you can kind of see the difference, the bevel there.
Yeah, very similar to the way
Overkill.
You can tell exactly the way zones have those little embossed edges in their previous games.
Right. So the way a zone works is each zone is a set amount of space or whatever, but zones can also not have more than the zone cap worth of models in there. And for the most part, a Marine is a model cap of 1. Somebody on a big base is a model cap of 2. Most zones can only support up to 4. So
correct.
Any combination. So you can have 1 Custodius and 2 Marines. You can have 2 Custodians, but you can't have 3 Custodians. So,
exactly.
Or you can have 4 Marines.
Or you can have 4. Yeah,
sure. So
in a single zone.
that you can also not move into an enemy zone. So if you're adjacent to an enemy, we'll get to this in combat, but you're basically locked in. So
yeah,
we'll get to that later. So that's zones. Obstructions, very simple. If there's an obstruction in the way, it's rubble or whatever, it blocks line of sight, and you can't shoot through that.
Correct.
Or draw line of sight through there.
It's just a big blocked area.
Right. Adjacent zone, that means 2 zones that are adjacent if they share a border. So that
not including corners. So there's no corner to corner movement or anything.
In this example, this zone and this area, if these were 2 separate zones, just because they share this little corner bit, they are not adjacent. It's got to be a full side, side to side.
Yeah.
Other than that, occupied zones, again, enemies, occupy zones. You can move into friendly zones as long as the space requirement is not
correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Range. Certain things do have a range, and it's usually determined in zones.
Correct. And we'll get to that when we talk about the unit stats.
Yeah.
But in general, yeah, I mean, as you can tell on an average board, there's not many, kind of the maximum range as it's measured in zones isn't that far.
Right.
So-
and for the most part, unless a weapon has a short range rule, you're going to be able to shoot them if you can draw line of sight.
Exactly.
So that's not that big a deal.
Yeah, so there will be shooting attacks that are
Across the board, literally.
Exactly. It is possible to shoot all the way across the board in certain circumstances.
Right. As far as playing the game's made up of 4 phases, which we'll talk about real briefly. The enumeration phase, aka the psychic phase.
That is where all of the spells and magic go off. This is the Thousand Suns dominated phase.
Right.
And it happens at the start of each turn.
Yep.
So at the start of each turn, the Thousand Suns are going to be like, haha, here's all of our magic, here's all of our cool abilities, and the Imperial forces will be trying to resist it.
Right. Then there's the movement phase, which is pretty self-explanatory. There's the attack phase, which includes both close combat and shooting, which we'll get to later, and then consolidation. The key thing, though, is we're actually going to show off how the psychic phase kind of plays out real fast.
So what we have here is, we have the willpower deck. So this is the deck that the Imperial player has.
Yep.
The Thousand Suns player has 2 decks. You can tell the designs on them are differently. This one is the deck that actually has your psychic powers.
Right.
And these are defined. These will be defined by the mission. We'll
Correct.
tell you these are the ones you get.
Each
So they're-
scenario has their own distinct psychic.
And then this is the set that defines basically kind of your warp charge. This is basically how much psychic power do you have.
Yeah.
And
in a lot of ways, it's warp charge versus psychic power versus warp charge.
Right.
Or
So
willpower versus warp charge.
right. So in a big picture, what you're really doing is in each enumeration phase, the Thousand Suns player can use up to 3 psychic powers.
Yep.
And how he's going to work is he's going to look through his hand. In this case, I'm just going to randomly grab the one off the top, but you would look through the ones that you had available.
Yeah.
And
Typically, you can't cast the same power twice.
Correct. So in this example, I'm going to say I want to cast hyper regeneration, and it tells you what the card does and what the effects of it will be if it successfully goes off. Then after that's done, I'll go to my deck of basically how can I successfully, I need to harness the warp to make that power go off. The Imperial player has his willpower, he's going to try to resist it. So I'm going to grab a card, and this is done randomly shuffled off the top.
You would shuffle your decks first.
So I'm going to grab my first one, and I'm going to go, haha, warp flux, I have 2 energy points.
And I'm going to flip my card over, Iron Will, I only have 1.
Okay,
That's no good.
And both players can now do this as much as they wanted to, up to a maximum of 3 cards per power. Because in theory, you might run out of cards.
Now, why would you ever want to not pull all 3 cards?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, I have an idea.
So I'm going to pull my second one. That's
Flux.
a 2. Are you going to try to resist me? Because
Yep.
you're already behind. So
I'm way behind now.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to.
Third one.
I'm gonna. You know what? I'm gonna stop. I think I'm good. Your third, 3. Okay, so you're maxed. So now we compare the totals.
3 to 4. It goes
4,
off.
you had 3, so this power will activate. If his had been higher, the power would have been resisted and it would not activate.
Right.
And then
Now, the reason I think that you would not want to pull all 3 cards is in each deck, there are here's a good example. There are special effects for the warp masteries. These can do stuff like cause the power to automatically go off and end the turn.
Right,
And do things like that. So you may not want to pull all the cards.
Right.
And for the Marines, yeah, here we go. Here's a good one. After the current power has been cast and its effects resolved or resisted, the enumeration phase ends immediately. So
Which
it
is
kind of
really
behooves
good. Right.
the Marines to try to draw as many cards as they can or play as many cards. But
Right.
But the kicker is once these cards are spent, they're put to the side, and then you
For that turn.
yeah.
Right.
And you don't shuffle back in until the
Right.
start over.
And the Thousand Suns player is going to go through that entire process up to 3 times.
Yeah, unless the phase ends.
And that happens at the very start of each turn. So as you can see, it's going to start off with the Thousand Sun player, is going to definitely get to do all of his hijinks and try to get in, all of his magic right then, and then you're going to be moving.
Here we have the movement phase. We kind of talked about this already a little bit. There is an initiative phase roll at the start of the turn too, which we kind of skipped over. Whoever has the initiative can move first or defer to your opponent.
Correct.
Yeah.
But the important part is that for movement, whoever has the initiative moves all their models first, not just one squad. So whoever wins in the movement phase, all of their stuff goes, then the other guy goes.
Yes.
So, and how you're going to do it is you're going to take your models.
Yeah, so in this example we're going to show off here in the book, you've got a Custodius and you've got Space Wolves here, and there's a Tartaros pattern, Thousand Sun Terminator right there. So the player that rolls highest can move the initiative, or again, do the opponent. It kind of depends. You know, why would you not want to have the initiative? Maybe they're not in range yet. You want them to move forward. So, anyway, because these two models are next to each other, if the Thousand Sun player had the initiative, they can actually move.
Right, he could move away.
He can move away. If he didn't, and the Adeptus Custodes here, if he wanted to go, he would have to have the initiative to be able to move. These guys are not sharing an adjacent square, therefore they can move.
Right, correct. So in general, each of your models is going to move one space into an adjacent zone.
Correct.
And you can
It's
do
got to
that.
be open and free. There's got to be,
Correct.
or against a model cap.
Yeah.
And you're going to move models individually.
Correct. So they're going to move individually. They're going to move one zone, and of course the rules are basically, yeah, you're going to move your one zone. You can't move into a zone that has enemy models in it. And if there is already enemy models in an adjacent zone, you can't move. You are locked in place unless you have the initiative.
Yeah.
Then you can move.
So in this case, he's got the initiative. He's pinned. He can't move. These guys are free to move. However, if they move here, they can't move any further.
Right.
But they could send models here to help out and a model here. It just depends. So
Correct.
that's pretty much movement.
And you're going to do that twice.
Correct. You can move up to 2 squares. Most,
But you're going to do them one at a time.
right. And again, most models are going to be able to move only 2 squares a turn. I don't believe you move diagonal either.
You do not move diagonal.
So it's going to be side to side movement. Corner to corner is another thing.
And when you are moving,
You got to keep the zone capacity in mind.
correct.
Again, we
So
talked
you
about
cannot
that.
temporarily overfill a zone, but
Yeah.
you are moving your models one at a time.
Right. So you could, if this guy wasn't here, you could, daisy chain him around.
Right.
So
But that means you do have to be careful. Like your movement sequencing is important because, as an example, let's say that you had a squad. Well, say that you had one zone with 2 custodes in it, and they've already moved.
nobody else can move through
Exactly. That's now blocked.
Yeah.
So because it's already at zone, so everyone else, even friendlies, would have to go around it.
It's true.
And then, so all your movement is going to be done. And then once it's all finished, then at the end of the movement phase, however, your guys end up being grouped together because, you've moved them around. So at the end of the movement phase, maybe you have a zone that has a Custodes and 1 Marine, or maybe you have a zone like this one that has 3 Marines. At the end of the movement phase, every group of friendly models that are in a particular zone basically
Form their own combat
they group
squad.
up and they form a combat squad, and they're going to fight in the combat phase as that squad.
And you're basically there. You basically just created a new unit.
Exactly. And you can freely break those up and reassemble them every turn.
Yeah. That's pretty much it for the movement.
All right.
Next up is shooting.
The combat phase.
Combat time. So the attack phase is also really simple. You're gonna get these handy dandy profile sheets.
We'll
I've
put
got
them-
the
we'll put them
Trader
here.
Thousand Sun one here. Larry's got the Space Wolves Custodians
Mhm.
one here. So real quick, you're gonna make your attacks. Again, we've already talked about the ranges and stuff like that.
On a per zone basis.
Per zone,
so,
exactly.
So it's going to be you're
Zone to
you're-
zone.
Exactly. So you're going to pick a combat squad that's in a zone, the attacker, and he's going to say, "I'm firing at the
That
defending combat squad."
Right. The other thing too
And
is this actually does alternate.
Correct. So and this is one of the core critical ideas and rule structures for the game. So movement is done on a per side basis. You're going to roll the initiative, and then if the Thousand Suns player wins, all the Thousand Sun squads move, and then all of the Space Wolves squads move afterwards. Then you move on to the attack phase. You've already rolled the initiative, so that carries over. So as an example, if the Thousand Suns had won and moved first, when you move to the attack phase, they have the initiative. That means they get to pick one of their combat squads, and it is going to make an attack first. And then it goes to the Space Wolf player, and then he'll attack back with one, and then you'll go back and forth until both sides are done.
So we're gonna do a quick example.
So how does this work?
Yeah.
Each squad has to choose. It has to choose between. Let's put our cards back here.
Yep.
So we'll show you examples, and we're going to start off with the Marines because they're the simplest guys. So as an example, Legion veterans. Every squad has every type of model has a
An armor
combat value
yeah, combat
and a shooting value.
You also have an armor value and the stamina value, which is important.
Right.
Because we're gonna show how that all
Your
works.
armor is going to tell you what size of dice you're going to be rolling to try to defend yourself against attacks. Obviously, the combat attack and the shooting attack is going to tell you what type of die you're going to be rolling, whether the unit uses a combat attack or a shooting attack. And then your stamina is the equivalent of wounds. So that's how many points of damage that particular model can take before it's dead.
Now, the interesting part about that is those wounds actually go away, which we'll show
Later.
Yeah, later. Those wounds actually go away after the consolidation phase. So if you don't kill the model outright during that turn, all those wounds go away, and he's back to full the next round.
Right. So just like you used to see in other games like Overkill, if you're going to put a model down who has a lot of wounds, you need to kill him in one turn. Now you can use multiple squads to do
Right.
it, but you got to kill him in one turn. Because if he has 4 wounds, if he has stamina of 4, and you put 3 wounds on him, and he survives to the end of the turn, when the next turn starts, he's fresh again.
Right. So let's talk about an attack real quick. We'll have an attack example.
Okay, so we're going to do an attack example. We're going to do an example of 3 Thousand Sun Legion veterans using their bolters who are in one combat squad, and they're going to be attacked. They're going to be shooting into another zone that has a single Adeptus Custodes in it.
Right.
So
now, your first thing you're going to do is create your attack pool. So
Correct.
I've got 3 Legion veterans, which means I get 3 D6s because I use a D6 for my bolter.
Right, you're going to be shooting with a bolt gun. So we go over here and we look and we see that your shooting value is a D6. You have 3 models in the zone, so you're going to get 3 D6s.
The attacker the defender on the other hand, is going to also start with the same number of D6s.
Right, so the defender always gets an equal number of D6s to the attacker's pool, regardless of how many models are in there. So if there's 3 Custodes in there or 1 Custodes in there, well, 2 Custodes is max.
Right.
The
number of attack dice is going to be equal to the number of defense dice. However,
so I have my 3 D6s over here.
For each model that has a better armor than a D6 that's being shot at, you get to replace or upgrade one of those D6s with the appropriate armor value.
So let's look at the Custodes. His armor is D8 because he has superior armor. So because there's only 1 model in the defending zone, I'm going to take my pool and I'm going to replace one of these with his superior D8.
Right. And now you roll simultaneously.
And
so
now-
we're
and
going
now
to
we
roll
roll.
quick.
Now we're going to roll them. Level up.
All right.
Okay, and now we're going to line them up from highest to lowest.
Right.
So I have a 5, a 4, and a 1.
This is not going to be good for the Custodes, I'm afraid.
Uh-oh, this is going to be bad.
So we're not going to talk. We're going to go through the script. You're going to highest lowest. You're going to compare. So
Okay,
my
so-
first one is a 6,
which is higher than my 5, so that one goes through and does a point of damage.
which it actually, if you roll a 6 or higher, it's technically a critical.
So that's double
It's
damage.
double damage, which
This is
we'll
actually
get to.
this is actually a really good example. So that counts as 2.
Yeah,
Now the second one, you're 5,
beat your 4.
so that's 3.
So
So it's another wound.
That's technically 3 wounds at this point, so it would actually kill the
And
Custodes.
then, right, and then that was a 3, 2, a 1. Wow. Basically, I rolled terribly. And
Now, let's back up for a second. Let's take your dice and say that's the 5. Let's say you rolled a 6. We tied.
Okay.
So
I'll
in
put-
this version of the game, or in this example, ties go to the defender.
Correct.
So
if I
these
rolled a 6,
cancel.
So those cancel out, and clearly no critical damage is done.
Yep.
And then you would have done 1,
Yep. I beat you there.
you beat me
you
there, and you would have done, and at that point you would have done 2. I look at the stamina of the Custodes, which is 3, and I would put 2 damage counters on him. He's taken 2 points of damage. If some other squad
Right.
can put another point of damage on him, he's dead. But for now, he's fine.
Right.
And if he survives to the end of the turn, all those wound counters come off him. At the start of the next turn, he's fresh.
Right. So it's very important to concentrate fire and try to do as much damage to a single unit. The other thing too is if he was in a mixed squad, you basically can assign that damage
Correct.
however you want because it's the defender that gets to assign the damage. However, just like in 40K, when a model starts taking damage,
It all
you have
has
to keep assigning that model
Right,
damage.
right. So,
that's
if,
important.
right. If, as an example, there was a Custodes and a Marine.
Right.
I could say, you know what? I want my damage to start on the Marine. So let's
Exactly.
do him first. But once he starts taking damage, he has to take it until he's done.
And it
So-
doesn't. It's not based on the armor value or the dice that you rolled, if matching or whatever. It's
Yeah.
based on the pool.
And there's lots of little subtleties and special rules, but pretty much that's combat.
That's combat. The same applies for close combat, just special rules based on the weapons or whatever. So,
All right, and
yeah.
let's move on and see what else is going on.
So the last part of the phase is the consolidation phase, which we're going to skip over because it's really just a cleanup phase.
Right, that's the cleanup phase. During the consolidation phase, you're going to be reshuffling all those power and warp cards and willpower back into the decks. You're going to be removing all the wound counters and just all that.
It's a cleanup set.
Right.
So we thought it'd be more interesting to show off at least one of the scenarios. There's 6 in this book. We're not going to go through all of them.
Correct.
We don't want to spoil it.
But you can, of course, obviously, like in all of the previous games, they form a campaign. If you play them all together, we're going to show you scenario 1 as an example to give you a feel for what things in this game look like.
To show a start, each scenario is going to have a great bit of fluff, that background lore to read, to set the stage. On top of that, it's going to list the forces that you're going to use in this particular scenario. It's going to talk about which psychic powers the Thousand Suns are going to start with. It's going to talk about the setup, how setup works, and your different victory conditions. And specifically in this example, your victory conditions are for the Space Wolf player to get at least 1 model to the exit points.
Right.
And the Thousand Suns mission is to kill everybody.
Right, and then obviously it's going to show you the map and how to set it up. So let's go over this one. Scenario 1, shatter the perimeter. The Thousand Suns are waiting. They're on the planet. They know the attack is coming. The Imperium has just landed, and they have to break the Thousand Suns lines to begin to start doing serious attacks. So you're going to be taking 2 of those large boards and then putting obstructions.
Yep.
The yellow zones are where the Imperial player starts, so he has to set up all of his forces there. The Thousand Suns player sets up in the red zones, here, here, and here. And let's go over, so that's the basics, and let's go over exactly what we're doing. So in this one,
the forces of the Loyalist are going to consist of Giger Fellhound, 1 Legion Veteran Tactical Squad, and a Sister Superior. The Traitor Force is going to have a Legion Veteran Tactical Squad and a Tartaros Terminator Sergeant.
So not a large amount of units, but this is game 1. This is kind of a small one.
Psychic powers, you're going to get 5 psychic powers in the scenarios, Bioelectrical Storm, Hyper Regeneration, Surge of Rapidity, and 2 other randomly selected psychic powers. So,
which they did say mini missions are like that. So it's not, so that big giant deck of powers, sometimes you get to pick, sometimes they tell you, sometimes it's random. And they'll...
setup, we talked about that already. Thousand Suns in the red, Space Wolves in the yellow, and then the victory conditions. The Space Wolves are trying to push forward. They need to move at least 1 model to the exit point zones marked in green. You can see there and there. And then the Traitors just have to kill everybody. So that one's pretty straightforward. It's a slugfest.
Right, exactly. So if one Imperial model makes it into a green zone, they then have to additionally move off the board from the green zone. But if they move off the board, if even 1 model moves off the board, Imperial player wins.
Right.
Instant victory. Thousand Suns have to wipe out everybody.
Yeah. So that sounds maybe a little one-sided, but it's really not. Just based on the number of models you're getting here, I think most of the scenarios here, like we talked about, compared to say the asymmetrical version of Overkill, where those were balanced in a different kind of way, but those are definitely asymmetrical. I think these missions are a little bit more balanced. Some may be skewed towards one side or the other just a little bit, but they definitely both goals feel achievable for both players.
Yeah, and you can see in a game like this, even though it's mission 1, there's going to be a lot of tactics and variability and replay value. Because as an example, those Marines that the Imperial player has, those Marines have a stamina of 2, so they're fairly easy to kill. You get a Sister of Silence, but only 1. Yeah. Who also has a stamina of 2. She's not particularly difficult to kill, but she has potent abilities to stop psychic powers who are near her. And then you, of course, have Fellhand, who has a stamina of 4, so he's the big superhero. So if you're the Thousand Suns player, you're going to be like, who do I go after? Are you going to be, because they only have to get 1 model off.
Yeah. The other big thing to think about too is in these descriptions of forces, there's no requirements as far as weapons.
Right.
So it just says a Legion Veteran Tactical Squad, and for both sides, and it doesn't say was it a close combat or whatever. Does it have a Melta, plasma options? Yeah. Thunder Hammer, Lightning Claw. You get to decide. So that's pretty cool.
All right, and we're just going to wrap it up with.
We got one last thing to show off.
Sure. What do you got?
Which is just the reference. We're just going to show that off real quick.
Right.
And this is the last thing we wanted to talk about. We're just covering everything we talked about already.
Right. So you get all the different phases: enumeration, movement, attack, consolidation phase. And then you get the little breakout boxes of here's how you cast psychic powers. We showed you that in the enumeration phase. You get all of the basics on how you attack and how it all works. How
There's
you
also
remove
a couple of
casualties.
special things like critical damage and press attack we're not going to cover.
They're fairly minor.
They're fairly minor, and there's a couple of little things that we kind of glossed over just for sake of brevity. But you get the general idea. This board tile game is not as complicated as a regular game of 40K, but it's really going to be fast and furious and just jump in there and
it's going to
get
be
playing.
fun.
So go check it out. We've got lots more stuff coming, so we'll be back. I'm AdamHarry from BoLS.
And I'm Larry Vela, and that is Burning of Prospero.